Surah al-Qari'ah is exactly 11 verses long. In that brief span, the text constructs a panoramic scene of the resurrection through a precise psychological and linguistic sequence. The opening of the surah bypasses traditional narrative setup entirely. It launches instead with a linguistic projectile, the isolated word, al-Qari'ah, the striker. Grammatically, this is an anomaly. The word is cast in its singular form without a predicate and without a supporting adjective. By presenting the subject in a vacuum, the text forces the listener to grapple with the word's resonance as an unmediated force. Even the phonetic strategy of the word is deliberate. The resonance of its letters physically mirrors the striking, buffeting dread that the event itself will inflict upon the human heart. Before a single visual image is introduced, the text has already established a foundation of dread purely through its grammatical structure and acoustic impact. From that initial strike, verses 2 and 3 immediately escalate the tension. The text deploys a series of unanswered interrogative structures. Here are the first 3 verses. The text isolates verse 2. What is the striker? This is tawil, rhetorical magnification, casting the event as overwhelmingly immense. Next is tajil, the impossibility of comprehension. Verse 3 asks, and what will make you perceive what is the striker? The psychological function of tajil is to set a definitive boundary. It forces the listener to accept that the actual essence of the resurrection is too massive for human perception to encompass, entirely beyond the reach of human imagination. Because the essence of the event cannot be grasped by the human mind, the surah pivots its strategy. It attempts to explain the unexplainable entirely through its physical effects on reality. Verse 4 moves from the abstract terror of the unknowable directly into the first concrete visual scene of physical reality. This diagram illustrates humanity reacting to the event as scattered moths. You see erratic movement without a central convergence point. This introduces a severe paradox of scale. Despite the human race's overwhelming multitude, they are rendered incredibly small and diminished. The moth implies a highly specific psychological state. Mankind is driven purely by panic, moving blindly toward destruction, possessing no personal direction and knowing no collective goal. This specific metaphor strips away the illusion of human agency. The entirety of global power and civilization is reduced to a state of directionless, fragile panic. After detailing the chaos of humanity, the text turns to the degradation of the natural world in verse 5, specifically targeting the mountains. This surreal imagery transforms physical terrain into carded wool. Solid, rigid, triangular forms slowly unspool and break apart. In a total inversion of physical laws, these ultimate symbols of permanence and mass are rendered so fragile they are swept away by mere breezes. Compare this dissolution of the earth back to the dissolution of humanity in the previous verse. Mankind loses its mind and direction, while the earth itself loses its physical mass and stability. Together, these scenes force the internalization of a terrifying physical reality. Every anchor or monument humanity clings to for stability will dissolve into scattered dust. With physical reality dismantled, the text transitions into its final sequence, verses 6 through 8. Only the reckoning remains. The primary visual metaphor of this judgment phase is the evaluation of the scales, which are cleanly divided into 2 categories, the heavy and the light. This diagram of a minimalist scale clarifies the theology behind the measurement. The heaviness or lightness does not evaluate physical mass, but rather what holds true weight in the sight of Allah. For those whose scales weigh heavy, the text uses precise, generalized phrasing to describe their destiny. He is in a life of contentment. The text intentionally avoids granular detail here. This generalized phrasing is designed to instill a broad, overarching shadow of satisfaction, capturing the most restful of bliss. Earthly metrics have been entirely erased. This sequence establishes a reality where only divine valuation determines a person's permanent existence. For those whose scales are light, the theological consequence is introduced with a stark phrase, "Then his mother is an abyss." Look at this isolated Arabic word, or mother. This carries a deep psychological archetype. It is understood as an infant's primary sanctuary and their ultimate point of return. The text then executes a violent linguistic subversion. It takes this universal symbol of safety and abruptly equates it with the hawiyah, the abyss. The final expressional of surprise of the surah lands in verse 11. It clarifies that this mother is not a place of rest at all, but is instead a glowing fire. The psychological impact is finalized through this horrific irony. The only entity waiting to embrace the condemned, their sole remaining refuge, is utter destruction. The linguistic architecture of the surah initiates with an acoustic strike, dismantles the physical structure of the universe, and concludes by permanently and terrifyingly inverting the very concept of safety.